In today's video, I'm going to show you how to do your own research in crypto using data and metrics. We're going to look at a variety of on-chain metrics like total value locked, fees paid, unique active wallets, transactions, and more. The goal is that by the end of this, you understand how to look at the fundamentals of different cryptocurrencies yourself. Welcome back to Dynamo DeFi. My name is Patrick, and quick disclaimer, I'm going to talk about a lot of different cryptos in this video to use as examples. But this isn't a suggestion that you do or do not buy any of them. It's purely educational. Now let's get into it. To start, let's set the scenario for why you might be researching crypto in the first place. Imagine you're talking to your friend, they start shilling you this coin they heard about, and they say, rumor has it, this thing is gonna cook. It's got the tech, it's got the founders, and it's going places. Maybe you'd ape in right away, but you might want to take a step back and think about, does this coin actually have the fundamentals to back up the hype behind it? And so in this video, we're going to look at a variety of tools to actually track the usage of different chains, the usage of different crypto protocols, and understand how many people are using it, how much money is being transacted through this protocol, and more. And so to start, let's look at the tools we're going to use today. There's going to be three main tools. First is going to be DeFi Llama. DeFi Llama is my number one go-to tools for analytics. They have total value locked, which is like deposits for DeFi protocols. We'll talk about that more in a minute. They have other stats like volume on exchanges, fees collected by protocols, stablecoin transfers, and more. I mean, I could do 10 videos on DeFi Llama, and in fact I have, but we're going to focus on some of the most important ones today. Then we've got Artemis. So Artemis is really cool because it has a lot more sector-specific metrics. So for example, you can go here and you can see trading volume on perp dexes. You can see bridge volume for bridges. So if you have something that maybe has a specific metric that is really important for that sector, you can use Artemis to look at that. And they also have this really great chain compare dashboard. This is one of my favorite things in Artemis. And what this does is it shows you stats like active addresses, transactions for a variety of blockchains, and then it lets you actually look at them visually to say, okay, for example, here, Solana we can see is growing both in absolute terms and relative to other chains. But we're going to look at this more in a few minutes. And then we're going to use DappRadar. DappRadar, I would say I don't use as much as these other two, but it is useful particularly for crypto gaming applications and for chains that have a lot of gaming on them. And the reason for this is that DappRadar tracks the most used dApps by metrics like unique active wallets. All right, so let's get into it then. First, let's pick a couple examples that we can look at. First one that I want to look at is going to be Sei. Reason being that it's a chain, so it's a layer one. We can use some of these chain level metrics for it. And Sei's gotten a lot of hype recently. They just launched their V2. They have a lot of protocols launching there, and their market cap is $1.1 billion. And by the way, I've interviewed the founder of Sei on this channel before, if you want to learn more about it. But so what we're going to look at today is, does Sei have the fundamentals to back up this market cap? Could the fundamentals justify an even higher market cap? And do they live up to the belief and hype that the community has for Sei on various social media? And then also let's choose a protocol. And one that I really want to look at is going to be called Raydium. Raydium is the leading decentralized exchange on the Solana network. Out of all the recent meme coin trading activity, a huge portion of it is taking place on Raydium. And so my question is, how is this translating to Raydium's fundamentals? Are they making money from it? Is the amount of liquidity on the platform increasing? AKA, are people depositing into it? What do Raydium's fundamentals look like given all this activity? And we can see the price is doing well, right? But what do the actual fundamentals look like? And we'll start with those two examples and see where we go. All right, so without any further chit chat, let's get into it. Here is DeFi Llama. First metric we're going to look at is total value locked. Total value locked, funny word, long way of basically saying deposits. So this is going to be the amount of money deposited on different DeFi protocols. And for blockchains, what it means is the sum of all of the money deposited on protocols on that chain. So for example, on Solana, this $9.151 billion. Let's see, I'll zoom in. $9.951 billion. That is the sum of the TVL on every protocol on Solana. So it's just deposits. And if it's a lending protocol, that might mean money lent out. If it's a liquid staking protocol, it might mean money liquid staked. It's going to vary what it means based on the protocol. And we'll talk about why that can be a downside in a second. Now, one thing you have to know about TVL is it's kind of contentious how to measure it. As you can see, there's all of these buttons up here on the top. And basically what this determines is what you count as TVL. And most of them are not going to be as relevant to you, right? Like you can leave them unchecked. But a couple that are important. The first one is liquid staking. I usually leave this checked, but some people don't. When I uncheck it, you can see this TVL goes down by over $50 billion. Basically, this means, do you count deposits in protocols that do liquid staking? And what liquid staking is a token like Ethereum, like Solana, is deposited into the protocol. They stake it for you and they give you back a token that you can redeem for at any time with the waiting period to withdraw from staking, which is usually a couple days, depending on the chain. And so the reason people do that is basically so they can sell it without having to wait a couple days. There's good arguments on both sides whether it should be counted or not. Generally speaking, I like to count it. However, I consider liquid staking, total value locked, to be less valuable than other types of deposits like lending protocols. The other one that you have to decide whether to include or not is going to be double count. So double count, you may have heard TVL criticized in the past, and usually it's because of the double count issue. That is, sometimes you deposit into one protocol. That protocol then deposits your funds into another protocol. So say, for example, you're depositing into some sort of yield aggregator that it's leverage yield farming, or it's combining two different yield pools, and then they're depositing into those other yield pools. In theory, that TVL is now in both protocols, right? But it's only $1, one token. Double count counts it in both protocols. If you uncheck it, that removes times that it's counted in both protocols. And you can see there's about $62 billion there. I usually leave that unchecked because it's not really, it basically leads to wild swings. And I don't think it's really a good way to measure the actual deposits. So with that being said, let's check the total value locked for these protocols. To start, I'm going to go to chains. And so this is, again, showing us the total value locked across all these different chains. We see, for example, Ethereum is number 1 with 107, and we can go down the list. And so what we want to do is we want to find Sei, and we could look at it here, or we could search for it. And now I am on the Sei page, and we can see here fundamentals are actually looking pretty good. The total value locked, aka the deposits in every protocol on Sei, of which there's a couple dozen, have been going crazy recently. They are up from around $30 to $35 million in mid-June to nearly $100 million now. And the first thing I always like to do, well, the first thing is to look at this. The second thing I like to do is this button here changes this from USD to Sei. What this is going to do is it's going to say, is the total value locked going up in terms of the token of this chain, or is it just going up in terms of USD terms? And the reason this is important is that sometimes prices go up, right? That's why we're in crypto. And so if the Sei price was going up, most of the deposits and protocols on Sei are going to be in the Sei token. And so what this does is it says, okay, if you remove price as a factor, right, we're looking at this TVL in terms of the token on this chain, what's happening? And we see here, this is it in USD, this is it in Sei. It is still going up. However, it has, at least over the past few weeks, it seems to have been stagnating in terms of Sei, whereas in terms of USD, it has continued to go up. And so what that means is that probably, at least over the past week or two, this growth was driven by an increase in the Sei price. So that's total value locked at the chain level. Before we move on to Raydium, let's look at a couple other metrics. You can see here that right in this dashboard on DeFi Llama, you can actually look at other metrics as well. They have volume, they have price, they have inflows, core developers, etc. There's a whole bunch. And the one that I want to focus on right now, besides TVL, aka deposits, is volume. And note, there's volume, there's Sei volume, there's derivatives volume, there's aggregators volume. I'm looking at the one that just says volume. And what that means in this case is the volume of all of the exchanges on this network. And why is that a good metric? It's a good metric because volume can be thought of as a form of economic activity on the chain. And so if you're measuring the volume, it's basically measuring how active are traders on this chain. And traders are going to be one of the most active types of crypto users, so it can be thought of as sort of a proxy for usage on the chain. There will be exceptions to this. There will be chains where people are primarily gaming, for example. That's what DappRadar is for. But in this case, if it's a chain that's built for decentralized finance, there's going to be people making trades. So we can look at volume. And what this is showing us is the total each day that is being traded on various exchanges on Sei. And we can see that this really started to take off at the start of July. So a bit after TVL had already started to move. And we can see that it was also high back in March, but then cooled off. However, this run up, unlike the previous one, it's been accompanied by an increase in total value locked. And you can think of eventually how this would translate into a more valuable network token. It means that the network itself is more valuable because you have more activity happening there. You have more money deposited into protocols. Also, people who are using these protocols, they are, in theory, either needing to buy the network token to trade with, or if they're depositing it, they're effectively removing it from circulation because they're taking it from their wallet, they're lending it out, and they're probably not touching it as much. So volume is the other thing, and we can see here, this looks pretty good. It is increasing, although I would like to see it increase more, right? Remember that the total market cap of Sei, you can see it here, is around 1.1 billion. So I'd like to see this keep growing to get up to maybe like 10, 20% of the total market cap. I'm talking about the TVL here. In volume, you'd want to see that continue to increase as well. Probably certainly getting into the tens of millions daily. And there's a lot of other good metrics on DeFi Llama as well. But for chains, I think TVL and volume are the most important ones on here. Then we might go over to Artemis, right? And this is the homepage of Artemis. First place I usually go is going to be the chain compare. And what the chain compare does is it shows you metrics like active addresses, transactions, TVL, DEX trading, and more, with a nice visual comparison between chains. In this case, let's remove some of these other comparisons because we want to hone in on Sei, and we want to understand how have Sei's transactions, etc., been trending. And we can see here that if we look at 3 months, in fact, let's go out year to date to understand where it is. If we look at year to date, we can see that daily active addresses has slowed down from where it was over here. However, daily transactions, after really peaking early in the year, have been steadily growing. And I would say this growth chart right here looks healthy, right? I mean, there's this one artificial spike here, but this looks like a steady increase in network activity. By the way, one thing you got to be careful of is when comparing transactions between different chains, really got to be careful with that. And honestly, I almost never do it. Reason being that certain chains have very cheap transactions, such as Sei, such as Solana. Those chains are always going to have far more transactions than other chains. And that is one positive of them. However, it means that, for example, it's worth it for someone to do a transaction that might be $1 or less. Whereas on other chains like Ethereum, it's not worth it to do those small transactions. Result being, they are always going to have more transactions, but you don't know how valuable those transactions are. That being said, this transaction growth looks good. The daily active addresses, I believe this over here was probably from people staking for airdrops. I'm not totally sure. May have also been people doing some sorts of NFT activity or meme coin activity. And if you look over here over the past 3 months, though, aside from this spike, it does look like daily active addresses are starting to grow again. You can see they were down to around 2,000 to 2,500 a day in May, and they're up to more like 4,000 to 5,000 a day now. And then they do have TVL, DEX trading volumes, etc. on here. However, I tend to use DeFi Llama for those stats. So let's say in brief, my assessment of this would be growth on the stats look good. However, I'd like to see them grow more to really come into and justify that market cap. And real quick aside, if you want to learn more about how to use on-chain stats yourself, as well as get curated on-chain metrics, I have a newsletter, dynamodefi.substack.com. The premium version includes over 3 hours of content about how to do all of this stuff on your own in great detail. And also I send out some more advanced stats, some things that aren't easily available on these websites, special analysis that I do every single week, if that interests you and you really want to dive deeper on this sort of thing. All right, so let's talk about Raydium now. If you go back to DeFi Llama and go to the overview section here, this is not going to show you chains. This is going to show you specific decentralized finance applications. And so what we want to do now is we want to track the usage of the protocol in question, which is Raydium. So RAY, you can either type in the ticker or the name here. And here by default, it's going to show us the TVL. And remember, that just means deposits. So in the case of Raydium, it means the liquidity that's being deposited onto it. And I would say that TVL is useful to tell which direction it's going, but it's not the most important metric for decentralized exchanges or really for anything. But let's see how it is. So we can see it was really high in 2021. There was a lot of deposits, some of it from actors who are no longer active in the crypto space or in the free world. If we look at it more recently, we see that it really got really low last year. However, it's been growing, and it's grown. It's grown from low tens of millions to now has over $1 billion again. Just tremendous growth. First thing I'd always do is I would change this to Sol. Again, Raydium, if Sol does well, Raydium will probably do well. But this is to tell, okay, is this protocol actually getting new deposits, or is the price of Sol just going up? And we see here that it is getting new deposits, right? Since February, it's gone from 1.4 million Sol to nearly 7 million Sol now. However, it has slowed down. Next metric I would want to look at for decentralized exchanges, especially, this is going to be, in most cases, the most important one, and that is volume. And we can add that directly to Raydium's chart here. This is the same volume we were looking at on Sei, or we can go over here on the left to the volumes tab and we can click on DEXs. And we can see here Raydium is ranked 3 after Uniswap and PancakeSwap. And so we click on Raydium, and this is the volume. You can aggregate it by daily, weekly, monthly, or cumulative. I'm going to do weekly. This current week is, of course, going to be less because we're not all the way done with it yet. But we can see here that this thing has been growing like a lot, and it's got a lot of volume. This one decentralized exchange is processing around $658 million of volume over the past 24 hours. Weekly, over the week of July 13th, it processed nearly $8 billion of volume. So that is a ton. And so now we know that Raydium's got the deposits. It's actually got even more volume than deposits. So basically, for every dollar deposited as liquidity on a weekly basis, that dollar is being traded on average over 7 times, which is incredible. Next question is this protocol actually making money? Are people paying to use it? And it's really important you look at fees. Reason being, I don't think this is the case with Raydium, but sometimes you will see exchanges that have wash trading to inflate this, to make it seem like more people are using it than actually are. What fees tell you is how much are people paying to use it, because it's one thing to it's one thing to just send money back and forth for free, but who is willing to do that and actually pay millions of dollars, right? You really have to believe that it's worth juicing the metrics in that case. So to see that, we go to this fees/revenue section here. And you can go to simple or advanced. I'll go to advanced. Why not? And you see here two metrics, fees and revenue. Those are related but different. Basically, fees is from the perspective of the user. So what that means is fees are what you pay as someone who's using the protocol, and you don't know who it's going to, right? It might be going to someone who deposited. It might be going to the protocol itself. It might be going to the treasury. It might be going to token holders. You don't know and you don't care. The fees are what you pay. Revenue is how many of those fees actually accrue to the token holders or the protocol treasury. So it's kind of like, in most cases, most of the money is going towards people who provide liquidity, but there's a little tax on because they got to pay developers. They need to fund the future growth of the protocol. There's merits to both fees and revenue, but generally speaking, I prefer fees. And that's probably going to be surprising to a lot of people because people think naturally, well, isn't it more important how much of the money actually goes back to the token holders and protocol than just what people are paying to, say, a lender or liquidity provider? And it does matter, right? It is important. Generally speaking, you want protocols that are actually collecting money so they can grow and pay token holders. However, the problem is that revenue is a function of fees and the tokenomics. And so then you have situations where something like Uniswap, which is one of, if not the largest DeFi protocol, rank 20 overall, they weren't collecting revenue, right? The fees were all going to liquidity providers. So you could have looked at Uniswap and you could have wrongly determined that these protocols with higher revenue were going to flip Uniswap because Uniswap wasn't collecting revenue for years. The truth is that Uniswap had something more important than revenue. They had complete market dominance on almost every chain they were on, and they had an enormous number of users who were paying an enormous number of fees to use the protocol. And so it's much easier for Uniswap to then turn on the fee switch where they are actually accruing something to either the treasury or token holders. And even if they don't, it makes the overall protocol larger and more valuable. So I think fees is a better way to measure the size of the protocol, how much people are willing to pay to use it. So let's go back to Raydium. We could have looked at it on this other page, but we can also look at it in conjunction with other stats. If we go back to the main protocol list, here's TVL again. And now I just click on this fee button to add fees. You could also add revenue. And this is showing me daily fees for now. I could also combine it by week, combine it by month. Let's do it by day. Day is fun. So we'll zoom in a little. You can see last year deposits were down, but fees were really down. But look at it now. Now Raydium is bringing in $2 to $3 million on a typical day, and that is actually going up and up. If we combine it by week, we can see that just had the best week ever. And that was on top of one of the best weeks ever. And it's just been going up over the past few weeks, and especially since last year, it's been on the up. So to me, this is actually even more important than volume, although it's nice to look at them in conjunction and see the congruency where everything is going up together. So Raydium, I would say stats are looking good, and even better than looking good, the stats are actually actively growing. Now let's go to DappRadar. DappRadar, we're going to look at different protocols on, but like I mentioned before, where this really excels is for looking at actual users. And the reason this is different is that for certain use cases of crypto, like payments, like gaming, they're not really going to be accounted for as much on these other things. That may change eventually, right? And they've made some overtures towards other sectors, but these are going to be largely focused on decentralized finance. But for something like a game, it's not necessarily going to be reflected there all the time. DappRadar is going to track users, which is going to be a more representative metric for games and a lot of payment things. So for example, we see this protocol on Near called Hot Game that has 1.63 million unique active wallets over the past 24 hours. over the past 7 days, we can look at this and we can see this Kai Ching app, which is I believe that's a shopping rewards app on Near, has around 6.43 million unique active wallets. Now, one thing you got to be careful of is some of these protocols, anything with unique active wallets is going to be very susceptible to airdrop farming, so might not always be accurate. That being said, I think it can be helpful to find protocols that actually have a lot of users, even if it's inflated a bit. You can also look at it by chain, for example. You can look at the number of dApps, and you can look at the total number of unique active wallets, and you might find some things that surprise you. For example, you find that Near has a lot of active wallets, largely from those payments and shopping type applications and games. Reminder that if you want to learn more about how to do this sorts of analysis and research yourself, I've got a great Substack where I compile a lot more resources on how to do this sort of thing, dynamodefi.substack.com. And for more videos like this one, be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, this is Dynamo DeFi.